Okay. Miss Deborah, third time is a charm. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Do I sound and look like I am synced? Is everything okay? Okay. Fabulous. Before shit starts to go sideways, I'm just gonna dive in. For anyone who's just now catching up, we're reading Leonardo Swans. The technology tonight has not been technologying, so I'm just going to start reading. If you have missed previous readings, you can find them on my YouTube page. Just go to my bio here on TikTok. It'll lead you to the YouTube link, and you can catch up on every single thing we have read so far. Oh my God. Okay. Isabella knows that the statue is meant to be a monument to the writer Francesco Sforza, father of Ludovico and one of Italy's greatest soldiers and conquerors. But as far as she can tell, the statue is a monument to the beauty of the horse, not to this horse in particular, but to all horses, or perhaps to the greatness of God who created these wondrous creatures. If Ludovico asks her what she thinks, she will say that the stamina and preternatural endurance and strength of the horse is evident, and symbolizes and reflects those same qualities possessed by his father, and by all of the other Sforzas, including the one who commissioned the work. But this is not what she thinks. She thinks that the horse is a glory unto itself, and to the genius who took so many years to apprehend the essence of the animal. But there is nothing to explain to Ludovico, Isabella is told upon her arrival. He is away, visiting his French ally, King Charles, at his military encampment at the Castello di Saranza in Tuscany. Beatrice, who cheerily delivers this news, is large with child. "My dear sister, you are tremendous. Should you not have already started your confinement?" Isabella really wants to ask Beatrice how she can manage to balance herself with her stomach swollen into such a great balloon. With Ludovico gone, and the kingdom in mourning over the Duke, and the anticipation of my husband being invested by Germany with the duchy, I must remain as active and visible as possible. Isabella would like to avoid any discussion of the dead Duke. She scours Beatrice's face for any sign of guilt, or suppression of knowledge, or complicity in the crime, for surely participation in something so heinous would demonstrate itself somewhere on the face, perhaps in an inability to meet the eye of another, or in the contours of a forced smile. But Beatrice's face is bright and open. She glows and crows over the sketch that Andrea Mantinega has made of little Leonora. "It's as if the tiny creature extracted the finest features from both parents," she exclaims. Isabella cannot help but feel that her sister is trying to compensate for the fact that the child is a female. She wishes she could join in the ploy, but nothing can induce her to feign enthusiasm in the face of this disappointment, especially not with one who has one son, and undoubtedly another on the way. Either Beatrice is carrying another strapping boy, or a baby calf, Isabella thinks, for surely no girl could make the womb stretch to such proportions. A fat nurse brings in the boy Ercole, holding him by the hand, restraining his eager strut. He is 2 years old, with shining dark eyes and golden brown curls. He has inherited Ludovico's sensuous mouth, already apparent on his little boy face. Isabella picks him up and covers his head and face with kisses, most of which he accepts on the hair as he ducks his face into her shoulder. He squirms in her arms as she tries to take him in with her eyes. Beatrice calls him Max, which makes Isabella wince. "Max, sing your new song for Auntie Isabella," Beatrice says. The boy refuses, shaking his head back and forth resolutely. "Max, where is your little brother?" The boy's arm shoots out like an arrow, pointing a finger at his mother's stomach. "Tell Auntie Isabella his name." "Francesco!" The child sings out the name. after his grandfather and his uncle, 2 great soldiers, Beatrice says. Isabella knows that her husband has declined Ludovico's request for him to serve King Charles. He would hardly allow his second son to be named after him. She knows that the boy, if the baby is indeed a boy, is being named solely after the late condottiere sitting in the piazza on Leonardo's magnificent horse. Isabella decides to steer the conversation toward the more benign subject of the monument and away from the difficult topic of soldiering. After all of Ludovico's frustration with the magistro, the result seems to have been worth the wait, she offers. Oh yes, Emperor Max was so impressed with it, Beatrice replies. The magistro brought great honor to us all. It's a masterpiece, Isabella says. Ludovico will be so pleased that you like it. You must accompany me tomorrow on a mission, Beatrice says mysteriously. I believe you will find the experience gratifying. The next morning, Beatrice drives them to the western outskirts of town, to the Santa Maria delle Grazie, the home of the Milanese Dominican friars, where Ludovico is investing large sums of money in improvements. Beatrice elaborates on Ludovico's fervor for commissioning Milan's greatest artist to glorify our Lord, but Isabella is certain that she reads a deeper motivation into the endeavor. The Dominicans are a mighty political force. With Lorenzo the Magnificent dead, Fra Girolamo Savonarola in Florence has escalated his hysteria against moral laxity and his campaign against the Pope. The more Ludovico honors the Dominicans, the less he will have to fear from the moralizing Dominican monk. Upon entering the church, Isabella is immediately struck with the contrast between the Duomo, which seems to her to dwarf the human spirit, and this building, intimate by comparison, that celebrates it. Beatrice leads them to the center of the apse, where they stand in a cube surrounded by 4 large arches. The sisters look up to the top of the dome, where small, round windows let in gentle circles of cold winter rays that illuminate the frescoes on the ceiling. A series of circular motifs line the arches, in harmony with their perfect hemispheric lines. It took Maestro Bramante 3 years to enlarge the apse, Beatrice says. We think it was worth the time and money spent. It's magnificent, Isabella replies. It is grand and soothing all at once. A difficult marriage of qualities. I did hope you would like it, Beatrice says. Ludovico and I will make our final home here. That is why we are sparing no expense in the decorations. See how lovely the choir is. I often think of how happy I will be when I am lying here being serenaded by Milan's most beautiful voices. Please do not speak that way, Beatrice. You are too young for such thoughts. Isabella touches her sister's stomach. You are getting so big. I am sure that the little one already has sprouted ears and is listening to every word we say. Ludovico says that he is much closer than I to making the church his permanent home. That is why he is pushing to have it completed. Of course he is joking, but he did promise the Dominicans that all will be finished within the year. Church, rectory, and refectory. Will he meet his promise? I doubt it, Beatrice says, smiling. One of the larger projects is in the hands of none other than the magistro. Beatrice guides Isabella from the church, through the courtyard, and into the refectory. A large rectangular room with plain wooden dining tables and benches in the center. A lone young monk sweeps the floor, the scratching of the broom against pavement echoing through the room. A vast mural of a crucifixion scene is painted on one of the room's walls. The others are blank. Even with so large a mural, the room seems cold and empty, Isabella says. Beatrice whispers, They say that the Inquisition trials were held in this very room. I must say I do not like it very much in here. It is cold and creepy, and I feel sorry for the monks who have to take their meals here. Oh, but what do monks want with cheer anyway, Isabella jokes. The gloom probably brings them closer to God. I wanted you to see the site of the magistro's next great work, Beatrice says. I also wanted to spy a bit on him to see if he had begun it. He promised Ludovico, but Leonardo is nowhere in sight, is he? No tools have appeared, no sketches yet drawn on the wall. The Duke will go mad. What is this grand project? Isabella asks, curiosity piqued as it always is concerning the Magistro and his schedule. We have commissioned a mural on the wall opposite the crucifixion scene of our Lord Jesus having his last meal with the apostles. Why did you have another artist paint the crucifixion? Would it not have been better and more consistent to have the entire room decorated by one artist? Oh, you are too clever, Beatrice says. You can tell that the crucifixion scene is not the work of the Magistro. Isabella eyes the figure of Christ on the cross, flanked by the two thieves. It is grand and large and dramatic, Beatrice, but the composition is poor for my tastes, and it is overcrowded with elements. It tells a story, but has little drama and no discipline of perspective. It could not be the work of Leonardo. And yet the artist finished it on time and without asking for a single ducat beyond what was contractually agreed upon. Imagine our delight. We had hoped to have the Magistro paint both murals, but Ludovico said that getting one mural out of Leonardo would be a great accomplishment. Another Lombard, Giovanni Monteforano, painted the crucifixion. He is not quite the artist Leonardo is, but he began on time and did not quit until he was finished. Ludovico asked the Magistro to insert portraits of us with our children into Monteforano's finished mural. That was the compromise. And when will the Magistro begin the Last Supper? Oh, you know the Magistro. He says he has begun preparations, but his concentration lies elsewhere. We are hoping that he does not have to make a study of prayer itself in order to insert portraits of Ludovico and me with our hands folded into Monteforano's mural. Isabella stares at the crucifixion scene so that she does not have to look at her sister. So I take it that you have conquered your aversion for sitting for the Magistro. She hears her voice rise as she asks the question. She knows that it is impossible to hide her agenda, but she cannot help but inquire anyway. No, not entirely. I do not like to sit for artists. I'm too fidgety. I particularly do not want to spend hours under his scrutiny. Though I revere his work, and though he shows only charm in my presence, he makes me uncomfortable. There is something dark and intense about the man. I do not believe I have ever met the light-hearted genius, Beatrice. At least he is handsome and mannered, and not sickly and sour all the time, like Mantanega. Ludovico says that the portrait by the great painter of our day will bring honor to the family, and so I must do it. He has convinced me that asking the Magistro to make my likeness is an act of love on his part. I must move mountains to get the man to paint, Beatrice says, throwing her arms in the air, imitating Ludovico. I would only make these efforts and go through this frustration for those whom I love. Isabella decides to say nothing. It is not her place to encourage or to scourge. Beatrice will do as she pleases, and now it seems that she is pleased to sit for the Magistro, not because it will please herself, but because it will please Ludovico, or aid his ambitions, or send the message to the clergy of Milan about their powerful benefactor, or appease Savonarola, or indelibly link in the minds of generations to come artistic genius with the mighty and powerful family, or accomplish whatever it is that Ludovico wishes such things to accomplish. It is clear that Beatrice's motives are selfless. After all, she says to Isabella, placing her small hands atop her big belly, Ludovico was in love with Cecilia when he commissioned her portrait. He is in love with me now. He tells me so all the time. I have seen how much effort and patience it takes to coax the Magistro to finish any of his works. I am sure that Ludovico would not take up this challenge unless it was in the name of love for me and his children. Leaving the refectory, entering the courtyard, Isabella and Beatrice see the broad back of a man sitting cross-legged on the walkway like an Eastern potentate, staring at a courtyard wall as if in a trance. His shaggy curls hang incongruently on the shoulders of his rich blue velvet cape. The late morning sun highlights the deep brown hues of his hair, as well as casts an elaborate shadow on the wall. A moldy water stain mingles with the shadows on the stucco. "Sir," Beatrice says. The Magistro, startled from his meditation, turns around. Upon seeing the Duchess of Milan and the Marchesa of Mantua, he stands abruptly and adeptly, Isabella notices, rising to a full stance without uncrossing his feet. "What on earth are you doing, Magistro?" Beatrice asks. He points to the stain on the wall. "I am looking at a great landscape of human drama, your excellencies. Do you not see it?" "I see a rather mildewed wall," Isabella says. "If the Duke is so intent upon renovating the church and monastery, surely he should order a fresh coat of paint for the exterior." "Marchesa, if you will permit me." Leonardo steps toward the wall, bending slightly and pointing. "Everything in creation might be seen in these shapes and shadows and quality if one looks with fresh eyes. I have seen in these humble discolorations great battles in progress, tableaux of life and death, jousting matches, babies being born, old women dying, goddesses rising out of the sea, boats crashing against the quay during a storm. It is all there, if one looks long enough and with enough concentration." Isabella stares at the wall, unable to see what the Magistro is talking about. She has seen shapes and faces in cloud formations, but she cannot make a scenario out of these stains. Beatrice, on the other hand, is nodding politely, as if she has begun to delineate the Magistro's imaginings. "Your Excellency," he addresses Beatrice with what Isabella discerns as either a sense of anticipation or anxiety in his voice, as if he is almost afraid to ask the question. "Have we word yet on the bronze?" "The bronze?" Isabella asks. "The Magistro wants to cast his horse in bronze, so that it will last for all time, or for as long as bronze lasts, and I do not think the world is old enough yet, as of yet, to know the life of a good piece of bronze." "It is mere clay, Marchesa, and will destruct with time and the elements," Leonardo says, making a funeral face. "I have been spending my days at the foundries, discussing methods of casting with the engineers and metallurgists in preparation for the project." "The Magistro has become an expert in the study of metals, a veritable alchemist," Beatrice says. "Your Excellency flatters me." "Not at all. I had hoped to find you here so that I might tell you the news. The bronze for the horse has been located, and you will have access to it immediately." Beatrice smiles, raising her eyebrows at Isabella. So this was her mission. Was she flaunting her power over the Magistro in front of her sister? "My eternal gratitude to you, Duchess," he says, tilting his chin toward what Isabella thinks is the direction of his heart. His face flushes with color, leaving him looking relieved, touched, and slightly embarrassed that he is blushing. "Congratulations, Maestro. Your monument will last for 100 generations," Isabella says. But she is thinking that this colossal new work will put her own sitting with the Magistro out of reach for God knows how many more years. "The Magistro has devised the most fascinating method for casting the horse. Will you indulge my sister in an explanation?" Beatrice asks. What woman does not know when she has a man's pride in her grip? Leonardo stoops down and reaches into a large leather satchel resting on the ground, pulling out a wide expanse of paper and unfolding it for Isabella to see. 2 drawings of the monument sit side by side. One, the sculpture is entirely replete with its rider. The other, the horse alone, drawn upside down and quartered into pieces. Complex mathematical formulas and measurements, all in impossible handwriting, cover the paper with other bits of unreadable scrawl. "I have begun to supervise the digging of an enormous hole in the empty fields to the rear of the castello. The purpose of this enterprise is so that the mold for the horse might be placed inside of it in an upside-down position, so that when the bronze is poured it will run through the animal's body." "Astonishing," Isabella says. "Has this procedure been accomplished before?" "No, Your Excellency, no such thing has ever been attempted. This will be the first equestrian statue of its size to be cast in the metal. Naturally, the endeavor demanded a new technique. The old methods are inadequate to the task, which is the reason for the delay." He looked pointedly at Beatrice. "Invention cannot be rushed. When one desires, as does our illustrious Lord Ludovico, to create memorials of a size and scope heretofore unseen upon this earth, one must tolerate the process of inquiry and experimentation." Isabella has never heard the Magistro speak so excitedly. The news of his arrival of the bronze seems to have infused his body with a new vigor. For a moment he has lost his perpetual look of detachment, and she believes that he even takes on the appearance of a younger man, what with his rosy cheeks and hurried speech. Speaking of my husband, he did wish me to add this caveat. You shall have your bronze immediately, sir, but on the condition that you begin the mural. The Duke has promised the monks delivery of all improvements and decorations to the church and monastery by the end of the year. Please do not put him in a difficult stead with the prior. Admonished, perhaps, but undiminished, Leonardo says, Madam, I have already spent weeks in the study of numerous types of faces in order to do justice to our Lord and the 12. The scenario I have in mind will be a great religious drama. The church bells begin to ring the noon hour, and the white and black-clad Dominican friars file out of doorways toward the refectory for their meal. Beatrice links arms with Isabella and excuses them, perhaps because she does not want to be caught in conversation with the prior, who has a reputation for being long-winded and difficult. As they leave the company of the magistro, Isabella says, How marvelous of Ludovico to allow these grandiose experiments! She wonders if her father, her husband, even herself, would have the patience, money, and vision to finance such an experimental endeavor, and one of undoubtedly great cost. Ludovico was astonished at the breadth of his research and his labors and his passion, so gave him permission to begin the dig. Did you see Leonardo's excitement, Isabella? He's worked so long on the horse, and waited so long for the bronze that he looked like a bride who had been betrothed for years and was finally called to the altar. Beatrice giggles. Isabella is not surprised that Beatrice would create the metaphor, since she had also lived that situation. But she has come so far from that humiliated girl who was not certain that her betrothed would honor the engagement that she doesn't even seem to make the correlation. That night, as Isabella blows out the candle at her bedside and closes her eyes, her mind is as jumpy as a cat. When Beatrice speaks of her husband, she glows with the fervor of a novitiate at the feet of a saint. If Ludovico had been complicit in the Duke's demise, Beatrice shows no trace of carrying the burden of that knowledge. Perhaps her adoration of Ludovico precludes believing the rumors, or perhaps she condones what he has done, if he has indeed done it. Isabella would like to soothe herself with the notion that she is now one step closer to being painted by the magistro, since Beatrice has agreed to sit for him, even though he will undoubtedly be years in the making of the bronze horse, much less the great mural. But nothing makes sense anymore. Logic does not necessarily apply. She feels as if she has suddenly been dropped inside a play where she does not know any of the other characters, but is expected to perform as usual. She is watching the shifts in alliances, personal, political, artistic, in the same way that she observes the currents of a great body of water, which move swiftly and are beyond her control. Survival will surely depend upon staying dry. Sleep is a gift. Dreams are light and forgettable. She can't remember where she is or what she is doing when she hears dozens of horses' hoofs pounding against the brick courtyard of the Rocchetta just outside her window. She is torn, wanting to remain where she is, wherever she is, because it is so pleasant, like the color pink or soft summer air. That is all she can hold on to of her reverie as her eyes pop open in the dark against her will, and she is ripped out of her dream state. She pulls the blanket high up around her chin as a defense against the clamor. She has gone to bed past midnight and has been asleep for hours, she is sure. Could some army have invaded the castello in the early morning hours? The walls are high, the moat is wide, and Ludovico's forces eternally vigilant. The Rocchetta is the private sanctuary of the family. Many a soldier would have to meet his death, or be bribed, before an intruder could enter this part of the castello. Just the same, Isabella finds her wrap in the dark. Her eyes begin to adjust, identifying forms. The tall, fat posts of the bed, the long table on which her hat sits in a row like ladies at cards, and the outlines of the vaulted windows high in the walls. She hears men in the hall, low, desperate voices coming toward her. She throws her arms around her chest, pressing her back against the bedpost. She has to struggle for a breath. Isabella's earliest memory is this: rebels bursting into the palace quarters of the Este family in the dark hours while Duke Ercole was far away from Ferrara, Her mother, long wavy hair and nightgown flying behind her, plucked the children from their nursery beds and took refuge in the fortress. The would-be kidnappers were on their heels as they fled capture, killing all who were helping the Duchess and her children escape. Mother and children spent 3 terrifying days protected by a small guard until Ercole reached Ferrara with his soldiers and put the rebels down. Isabella still remembers running along the dark hall with her tiny, sweaty hand clutched in her mother's silky gown, trying to keep up with Leonora, who held little Beatrice in one arm and her infant son in the other. The sounds and images are never far from her conscious thoughts. The shrieks of the servants, the clash of armor as their guards tried to hold back the rebels while the royals escaped, the cries of people dying as she ran away, and the terror of letting go of the piece of silk in her little hand, her only lifeline in that black tunnel of a hall. Gasping now for breath, she forces herself to stretch one hand before her like a blind man. With the other clutching her shawl to her chest, she makes her way to the door, cracking it open. The shadow of a torch dances along the wall, undulating toward her like a snake on its belly. Above the din and clatter, she recognizes the voice of Ludovico, shouting orders. Relieved, she rushes into the hallway to intercept him. He looks like a giant in his riding clothes. Black feathers plume from his broad-brimmed hat. A cloak of wool trimmed in thick fur hangs on his wide shoulders, swishing about him as he strides forward. The men around him are cloaked as well, but their garments are flung back around their necks, and their hands are on their swords, slung low at the waist. Are they under attack? Isabella stops running when she sees Beatrice, arms held by 2 servant girls, step into the hall from her chamber. Beatrice is bloated and awkward and falls like a rag doll into Ludovico's arms. One of the girls explains that the Duchess has taken a potion for sleep. "I was so worried," she mutters, looking up at her husband. "No letter from you yesterday." "Go back to bed, my darling. All is well." Ludovico looks down the hall, spotting Isabella as he pets his wife. "Look who is awake. Isabella will share a cup of wine with us and hear our gossip." Ludovico kisses Beatrice tenderly all over her face as he speaks to her. "You must rest. Your time is near." When he lets her go, he leaves an imprint of the dust on the road on her pale blue shawl. Beatrice looks relieved, falling back into the arms of her attendants. Ludovico motions for Isabella to follow the men down the hall and into his study. She walks in the wake of their scent, the sour sweat of men and horses clinging to their heavy clothes. They must have ridden long and hard, she thinks, to have mustered this odor. The silent machinery that runs the castello has sprung to motion. Everyone but Isabella is dismissed at the door. Valets hold out their arms to catch Ludovico's heavy coat and hat before rushing the garments off to the laundry staff. Inside, wine has arrived, and with it tubs of water and fresh towels to cleanse the grime and dust from his face and hands. Lamps are already lit, along with a great fire, softening the hard edges of Ludovico's heavy furnishings and illuminating his face, glowing with sweat and what looks like fury. Isabella keeps her distance. Ludovico's foul smell and foreboding arrival invite no outstretched arms, no tender, familiar kisses. She stays on the other side of the room, arms folded about her chest. "That damn pock-faced, lying hunchback shit-sack of a French king!" Ludovico wipes the back of his neck with a towel and throws it on the floor. "And that pale, quivering Florentine eunuch, a disgrace to his father. May they both keep Satan company for eternity." Isabella waits for him to elaborate. "Betrayed, manipulated, lied to, deceived, done in by an idiot and a conniver." Ludovico takes a long drink of wine. A tiny stream of red liquid trickles from the corner of his mouth into his long hair. He freezes, back arched, dropping his goblet, crying out in pain. "Oh, my back, my legs!" He throws his hand into the curve of his lower back. "I cannot ride the way I used to, Isabella. Help me to my chair." Isabella allows Ludovico to lean on her shoulder as she guides him to the big leather chair into which he sinks. "Are you ill?" she asks. "No, just pinched in the back and bowed and stiff in the legs. We have ridden day and night all the way from the Tuscan hills." Isabella notices that Ludovico has grown heavier. His belly spreads out about him as he leans back, stretching his feet in front of him. She sits directly opposite, looking into his face for clues of what has happened. He narrows his eyes and licks his lips, and she thinks for a moment that he looks like a great black snake. We have been at the camp of the King of France. He lied to us to get what he needed, and we have been betrayed by Piero de' Medici, son of the late Lorenzo, who is a blight on his family's name. Ludovico leans forward, wincing with pain as he signals with his hand for Isabella to come closer. None of this must reach your sister's ears. Not yet. Not until she has delivered the child. She is hardy and healthy, but also delicate in her way. She is very excitable. Brother, as of yet you have told me nothing, so there is nothing to share but some name-calling. That craven idiot Piero de' Medici, who is unworthy of the title of Prince of Florence, literally threw himself at Charles's feet, offering him control of Florence, Siena, and Pisa, in exchange for nothing, to avoid invasion. Can you imagine? Lorenzo the Magnificent must be vomiting in his tomb. I was a witness to it all, Isabella. I could not disguise my horror. You should have seen the looks on the faces of the French. They were stunned. This fool simply handed them a substantial part of Italy, 3 of its strongholds. Even the arrogant French were hard-pressed for a response. They did not refuse him, certainly. No, they certainly did not. I saw Medici afterward. He came groveling to me, saying that he had tried to meet me on the road to welcome me, but had missed me. I was with some French officer, so I could not tell him exactly what I thought of him. I made some excuses to Charles and left Soranza immediately. But you yourself have sided with the French against Naples. Now Piero is siding with the French against Naples as well. Without Lorenzo to counsel him, perhaps Piero thought he was following your example. Isabella knows that these incriminating words should not have escaped her tongue, but she could hardly take them back. Who invited the French into Italy in the first place? That is what she wanted to ask. Why is he so upset that others are simply doing as he did? And yet he looks confused and vulnerable, like a man whose mind has made too many calculations and cannot believe the numbers he has ended up with. I sided with the French to contain Naples's aggression. King Ferrante was in deep conspiracy with the Borgia Pope to trample over the whole of Italy and turn us all into papal states. Surely you understand that. Your own father sides with us. But now Charles has gone too far. It is worse than you know. His nephew, Louis, Duke of Orleans, is sitting near my borders, reminding everyone that his grandmother was a Visconti. He is claiming to be the legitimate Duke of Milan. Charles is not agreeing with him. Not yet. Nor is he silencing him. What are we going to do, Ludovico? Are we to become French? Isabella is wondering how quickly she can get this information to Francesco, if there is a pair of hands in Milan that she can trust to carry the letter. It seems to her that this is the end of them all. From the road I sent letters in secret to Venice, to your husband and your father, to the King and Queen of Spain, to Emperor Max, and yes, even to the damned Pope, though all of us despise him and pray daily for his demise. I have informed them of the French menace and the latest developments, and have proposed that we form an Italian league to protect ourselves. I am under no illusion that these can be permanent alliances, but we must stop Charles and Louis, and we are going to need our combined armies to do it. But the French are marching on Naples, and they believe that you are their ally. We shall let them believe that for the moment. We cannot stop them from attempting to take Naples. I sent letters to Charles and all the French ambassadors congratulating them on their various conquests around the world and assuring them of my loyalty. I wished them good fortune. Charles has no reason to doubt me. At his request, I left Galeaz in his service. He rides everywhere alongside the French king. For show, I suppose. For show? Isabella knows that Galeaz is loyal to Ludovico, and would pretend loyalty to the French if his prince demanded. As you know, they wouldn't have Francesco, Ludovico says, a little too venomously for Isabella's taste. For some reason, a dashing Italian soldier at his side is essential to Charles's plans. Isabella is trying to decide whether a mind capable of these plots is also capable of murder. She knows that she has been taken in by Ludovico, that he had cultivated her affection. She, just 16 when they had first met, in anticipation of requiring her loyalty, not to mention the loyalty of her husband and her father at a later date. Oh, she has no doubt that he was attracted to her, as she was drawn to him. They have still share, a love of all things beautiful. She has glimpsed into his soul. It is not black, but full, of ambition, to be sure, but also of the desire to improve and achieve and to make the world more pleasing to live in. Ludovico is a forward-thinking man. As the Magistro once said, a man who believes in the future. How far is he willing to go, or has gone, to ensure that the future belongs to him, Isabella is not certain. I have also proposed that Francesco be named Captain General of the Italian League's army. Can you bear it if your husband commanded all of the armies of Italy? Oh yes, she could bear it, if it served the greater good of all the city-states, and not just the ambitions of Ludovico Sforza. If the Doge of Venice sanctions the appointment, how could he refuse? Isabella does not want to get into a discussion of Francesco's various loyalties. At times he could be as convoluted as Ludovico in his thinking. Ludovico tosses back the rest of his wine, gulping greedily. For the first time this evening he takes a deep breath, relaxing his features. His pinched eyebrows settle back into their perennially amused, arched position. He wipes the wine from his lips with his sleeve, revealing a slight grin. It is as if he has suddenly decided to enjoy it all. My dear, with the French practically encamped on the Doge's lawn, I seriously doubt he will question my wisdom. From the notebook of Leonardo. On the cruelty of men. A prophecy. There will be seen on the earth creatures fighting each other incessantly, and there will be very heavy losses on both sides. The malice will know no bounds, and by reason of their boundless pride and arrogance they shall wish to rise toward heaven, but the excessive weight of their limbs shall hold them down. There is nothing on earth or under the earth that they will not have chased, molested, or destroyed. That which is made in one country shall be taken away to another. O earth, what delays you in opening and hurling these attackers headlong into your huge abysses and caverns? Would that the savage and the ruthless were no longer displayed in the sight of heaven. Isabella has been trying to get out of Milan for weeks, but her efforts have been daily sabotaged by the astrologer Messer Ambrogio, who can't seem to find an auspicious day for the Marchesa to return to Mantua. Every day she grows more desperate to leave, and is increasingly angry at being held hostage by the stars. She has neglected her own family long enough for the Sforzas, and recent developments have confirmed the need for her to hurry home. 3 weeks ago she received a letter from one of her ladies-in-waiting, a devoted friend whom Isabella has known from childhood. The letter was written in light tone, but the message the woman chose to convey has shaken Isabella. The Marquis is out of sorts with you being away for so long. He's so desperate that he actually said he wanted to go to bed with me, but I saw the request for what it was, the plea of a lonely husband for the return of his beloved. Do hurry home. All of Mantua misses you and wishes to see you. Isabella has paid no attention in the years of her marriage as to whether Francesco has been faithful. He has performed with vigor his duties as a husband. He acts as if he is mad for her, in bed and out. He is charming and flirtatious with all women, but she is willing to pay the price of jealousy to have a desirable husband. But the letter felt all too much like a warning. Besides, she has done her business here in Milan and is anxious to leave. She attended the birth of Beatrice's second son, a beautiful dark infant who looked like a copy of Il Moro. She held the child at the baptismal altar in the Duomo as he was christened, wiping his little royal eyes with a muslin and lace handkerchief when the near-sighted priest dribbled the holy water down his forehead. She waited upon Beatrice for as long as Beatrice had agreed to remain confined. She helped to host many parties and ceremonies around the birth of the boy, whom Beatrice did not want to short-change just because he was the second son. To celebrate the birth, the entire city and its environs had been decorated beyond the splendor put forth for Beatrice's wedding. Every building and balcony was decorated in the Sforza colors of scarlet and blue, every column ribboned and wrapped with ivy and boughs, every statue polished and painted. Streets were repaved, sidewalks repaired. Even in the weak winter sun, the entire city glimmered. The greenery brought in from the countryside gave the impression that it was already spring, and not the dead of winter. Theatrical performances were given nightly, with parties afterward, feasting, drinking, and dancing until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Beatrice had recovered quickly from the labor, and 20 days after her son was born, was in attendance of a splendid performance of the fable of Hippolytus and Theseus given at the home of Niccolo da Correggio. At the after-party she danced every dance, including the last one. The next day she was on her horse, racing through the park with Isabella, ignoring the cold weather, jumping fences, and threatening to arrange a hunt, though it had not been 1 month since she had given birth. Isabella was enjoying herself through all these activities, but she wondered if the mad schedule of entertainment was meant to block out the trouble that was brewing just outside of Milan's walls. It seemed to her that there was a new desperation to Beatrice's activities. Her sister had never been one to sit still. Now it appeared to Isabella that Beatrice was unable to relax at all. Nights were spent in festivities, days were spent holding Ludovico's hand as he received responses to his secret plan to form an Italian league. Everyone contacted had agreed to participate. As Ludovico pointed out as he received word from solicitous ambassadors. What choice did they have? What with France closing in from every direction? Then an omen appeared in the midst of the fest, or so Isabella regarded it. The widow Isabel of Aragon, bitter, veiled, draped in reams of coarse black cloth, left the castle at Pavia and moved back into the castello in Milan with her 3 sorrowful-looking children. Like a spectre, she silently wandered the halls, occasionally letting a lengthy sigh escape from her downturned mouth. They could not stand her another moment in Pavia, so they've shipped her up here for us to cope with, Ludovico complained one evening at a party. Beatrice had been tired that evening and had retired to her bedroom after supper. Isabella guessed that the presence of Isabel of Aragon, haunting the halls of the castello where she had once presided as duchess, as if she and not her husband had died, was embarrassing to Beatrice, and was wearing her out. Suddenly, with Isabel's appearance, Beatrice's wild activity ceased. That witch has covered her apartments in black as if she expects the devil for dinner. She has the audacity to play the bereaved widow. Is that a joke? I had to promise her husband every bottle of wine and every choir boy in the Duchy of Milan just to get him to fuck her. Isabella noticed that Ludovico directed his mock frustration at one of Beatrice's ladies-in-waiting. She also noticed that he was pleased when the lady laughed a little too loudly at what he had said, then covered her gorgeous mouth with her hand. She was perhaps in her early 20s, with dark hair that, in the candle glow, had the same hue as a rich red wine. Her eyes were green or blue, Isabella could not tell, and her skin creamy white beneath the rouged cheeks. She wore a robe of crimson satin with great gold cords at the sleeves, and a very low bosom that revealed ample white mounds. Isabella knew the face, but could not place it. Beatrice had hundreds of ladies who served her on a rotating basis. Isabella did not like the way that Ludovico was eyeing this one as if she were pork on a platter, and he days from his last meal. We all well remember the poor boy's proclivities, Ludovico said. Alas, I did my best to provide her with heirs, and I was successful. Despite your complaints, my lord, you have certainly done your duty by poor Duchess Isabella interjected. My sister is so grateful that you relieved her of welcoming the Duchess back into Milan while she has been recovering from the birth. But then you are relentless in looking for ways to make my sister happy, are you not? Ludovico forced a smile. Perhaps he was unhappy to be reminded that he had a wife. Isabella wanted him to know that she was watching. She had once been the object of his sneaky attentions. Did he think that he could get away with his flirtations under her nose? She looked to the lady in crimson to see her reaction to Beatrice's name. The woman smiled politely and turned her face away, as if suddenly bewitched by a tall candlestick on the tall table behind her. It was true, however, what Isabella had said. Ludovico had met the bereaved Duchess at the gates of Milan. He had held her hand, consoling her as they rode through the streets. He was seen crying with her in the Duomo as they visited Gian Galeazzo's tomb, and he escorted her to her old quarters in the Castello, where, exhausted with a day's worth of tears, they fell upon each other's shoulders and cried a little more. All this was given in a verbal report to Isabella by Barone the jester, a Mantuan in Ludovico's service who could not decipher whether the new Duke of Milan was chivalrous or hypocritical, or both. Or perhaps he is trying to overcome his dark deed with a round of sympathy for the widow, Barone whispered. Only a jester could get away with such an utterance. Isabella made it a point to visit poor Duchess Isabel in the Castello. Her rooms were hung with black curtains, and the windows were draped. Her children, once meant to inherit the kingdom, but now mere orphans dependent upon Ludovico, appeared in and out of the gloom, showing their faces in the light of the few candles their mother lit, complaining they could not see, and that the mourning clothes they were forced to wear itched their skin. They longed to play out of doors, but were not allowed. Isabella stayed in the dark room as long as she could bear the proximity to the overwhelming misery. As she was leaving, the dethroned Duchess hissed in her ear, "You do know who has brought this misery upon us?" Isabella did not answer. Aragon continued, "When my little boy rides through the streets, the people shout, 'Duca! Duca!' They are sick of your brother-in-law levying taxes to pay for his grandeur. You will see, Marchesa. Mark the words of a disgraced woman." To which Isabella curtsied respectfully and fled down the hall. Soon thereafter they received news that Naples had fallen to the French. The elderly King Ferrante had recently died. Thank God, agreed Isabella and Beatrice, so he did not live to see the downfall of his kingdom. His son Alfonso, father of Isabel of Aragon, who had pretended for so many years to be as fierce as his father, panicked, abdicated, and fled to Sicily, leaving his young son, Prince Ferrante, to face the French. Fearing the violence, the people of Naples opened the city gates to King Charles and his army. Isabella began to plan her escape from Milan. The tragic sight of poor Aragon and her children, and the fate of Naples, reminded Isabella of the price of all the parties and feasts. Aragon had looked at Isabella with frantic eyes and asked, "What would your poor mother, a princess of the house of Aragon and the kingdom of Naples, think of the betrayal of her family?" Isabella had asked herself that very question many times, and had never arrived at a comfortable answer. With apologies to Ludovico and Beatrice, she made it known that she was to leave immediately and sent her envoys and stewards to prepare for their departure. But Ludovico would not let her leave. He had consulted with his astrologer, as he did on all matters, who said it was not safe for the Marchesa to depart. Every night the astrologer gazed at the stars, and each time it was reported to Isabella that she had to wait for an auspicious time before the Duke would allow her to go. She could not imagine what Ludovico was up to. Surely there was no reason to keep her in Milan. She had her own family and her own duties to attend to. She was tired of the feasts and nervous about the future, of Italy, of her marriage. If Ludovico was correct, Italy would soon be at war with France, and her husband would be at the head of the army. She imagined that if Francesco was trying to seduce the ladies of the castle, fear of what was to come was at least partially responsible. Didn't men always try to drown their fear in lust? Her absence all these months could not be helping. Finally, after 10 days of inauspicious cosmic alignment, she was informed that Messer Ambrogio figured the day of March the 5th for her departure. Though the weather was still cold, the ice on the river had melted, and Isabella decided to take a Bucentaur back to Mantua. Ludovico insisted upon escorting her to the dock at Pavia, where he had other business to attend to. Though she would have preferred to travel alone, she allowed it. For who could say no to Ludovico these days? They travelled to Pavia in a caravan of sorts, with Ludovico and Isabella on horseback and a train of enclosed carriages accompanying them, full of items that Ludovico said were to be used to further decorate the castle at Pavia. When Isabella tried to get a peek at his treasures, he stopped her. "You will only try to negotiate me out of the finest pieces," he said. Once they arrived at the castle, the items were stashed away, and Ludovico left Isabella after an early supper. The next morning, as she waited for him in the grand reception-room, she saw from the window a woman walking alone in the courtyard, the giggling lady-in-waiting in the crimson robes she had seen before. Now, without rouge on her face, in a simple cornflower blue morning gown with a pale shawl over her shoulders, and her hair falling in lush ringlets, Isabella recognized her face. It was that of the Madonna, sitting among the strange rocks in the Magistro's altarpiece in the chapel at San Francesco Grande. Beatrice had said that the model was one of the ladies in her service, Lucrezia Crivelli. Isabella did not have to ask herself what the woman was doing in Pavia. It was all too obvious. She was one of the treasures that Ludovico had transported to decorate his castle in the old city. Isabella's stomach fell. Her heart ached for her sister. Beatrice would commit every drop of her blood to her husband's ambitions, based on her faith that she was forever to be Ludovico's young darling. But here was one who was ever the more darling. Lucrezia was sleek and curvaceous all at once. Her skin glistened in the pale morning light. She looked well rested, not kept awake as Beatrice had been for many a night, with worries over the health of 2 children, or listening to her husband's grand plans for his political ascent, or comforting him as his friends became enemies, or soothing him over his possible culpability in the death of Gian Galeazzo. Beatrice had given everything, and this was to be her reward: infidelity with one of her own ladies-in-waiting, under the noses of the staffs of 2 royal palaces, and God knows who else. Beatrice had betrayed her beloved grandfather, turned her back on the house of Aragon, borne 2 beautiful sons, befriended the Duke's former mistress, presided over his court using all her charm, impressed the Doge of Venice, the Emperor of Germany, and the King of France, and supported her husband's ambitions to become Duke of Milan no matter what the cost. What more did he require? Isabella can hardly look at her brother-in-law as they ride together in a chariot toward the dock. Yes, it is true that she had her own flirtation with Ludovico, but that was when Beatrice was a silly and skittish girl, not the devoted wife and fine duchess she had become. Isabella wants to race back to Milan and warn her sister, or put her arms around her, or somehow protect her from what is surely to come. Beatrice is not built for disappointment of this kind. "You are aware of what must happen, Isabella," Ludovico says, breaking the silence. He has interpreted her angry thoughts, and she has no idea what he is talking. He has interrupted her angry thoughts, and she has no idea what he is talking about. "No. What must happen?" "The Italian League must be solid and strong. Venice has been a rival state for many years, but in order to preserve our independence from the French, Venice and Milan must stand together." "Yes, of course," she says, realizing that Ludovico has kept her in Milan until he heard from every potential ally, including Venice. But the Venetians are known to be inscrutable and crafty, and this is why he insisted on accompanying her to the dock, to make a last-minute impression of the job she was to do for him with Francesco, to ensure that he would promote the cause of the Italian League with the Venetians. She says no more. She is not in the mood to be either supportive or solicitous of him. The river is flat and gray at this time of year, a perfect match to the skies. When they arrive, servants are already loading her belongings onto the Bucentaur. Open horse-drawn carts have been parked on the dock, their contents being loaded onto the boat next to hers, a long, flat river barge. The restless horses make great clomping noises against the wooden planks of the docks as they dance impatiently in place, while a crew of 6 men maneuver pulleys laden with heavy metal squares. A tall man wearing a royal blue cloak, richly embroidered with metallic threads, directs them as they guide and stack the bricks with great effort. Each package makes a loud thud as it falls upon the other. "Is there anything you wish to send to your father in Ferrara?" Ludovico asks. "The barge is going directly to him." "And what are you sending to him?" she asks. "Bronze, to make a great cannon. The French have very strong artillery. We must equal or best them." The man in the blue cloak turns around, and Isabella recognizes the face of the magistro. Though it has been but 2 months since she saw him at the refectory, he has aged. The lines on his face have deepened into great crevices, and his hairline has begun to recede. His curly mane and his beard are unruly and uncombed. His dress is impeccable, and he is still grand, but something essential in him has changed. "Why is the magistro directing the shipping of goods on the river? Do you need a genius to do the least of your bidding?" she asks. "That is the bronze that we had collected to cast the statue of the horse. I told Leonardo that conditions being what they are, we have to forego the project for the time being. Everything is for the war now. He insisted on supervising the shipping of the material himself. He said it was an opportunity to test a system of hoist and pulleys that he has devised." "But he has already worked for years, my lord. The statue is a masterpiece, but the clay will decompose over time. It will be lost if he cannot cast it in bronze." Isabella feels as if she is losing something in this transaction, as if something precious is being wrested from her. What is a cannon compared to an immortal work of art? This is horrible! She wants to scream at Ludovico, but she can tell by his face that he would only accuse her of thinking like a woman, of valuing beauty over power, when all rational beings know that with the acquisition of more power comes the ability to acquire and produce more beauty. It is a temporary situation. He understands, believe me. He is a great military engineer, and has already come to me with marvelous designs for new weapons. I believe he is excited about the possibilities of war. In the meantime, I have advanced him money to paint a mural of great scope and drama. It's better if he devotes his energy to that one thing. The horse is an extraneous obsession that he does not need at this time." Isabella does not believe Ludovico's justifications. She can read sorrow in every gesture as Leonardo watches his precious bronze floating away from him to create something that will end life rather than create it. What was going to be a monument to a great warrior must now become a weapon, Isabella says. It is ironic, isn't it? Yes, but it's fitting somehow, Ludovico says. My father was a soldier first and foremost. He would not have objected. Still, is there no way? Isabella can only imagine the magistro's pain. Why should his work suffer for Ludovico's ambitions? She wants to run to the artist, to comfort him for his loss, to tell him that she will find him some bronze, in Mantua or somewhere. She will talk her father into sending it back. But she knows that when men set their minds to war, the pleading of a woman will not alter their course. Perhaps it is better this way, Ludovico offers. Casting the statue in bronze would have taken him years. He does not need another distraction. Can you believe that he still spends hours and hours in secret trying to make wings? I am told that he is making plans to soon attempt a leap from an undisclosed building of great height. I pray to God that he finishes the mural of our Lord's Last Supper and the portrait of my family before he goes crashing to his death. Will he really attempt such a thing? He does not look insane. Isabella does not want to envision this broad-shouldered, middle-aged man trying to alight from a roof as if he were a bird. Do you think that all this nonsense about flying like a bird is gossip? No, I do not. I have spoken with him of this obsession. It is real. His motto is that the painter must possess all forms of knowledge useful to his art. But what does taking flight have to do with painting? Must one actually be a bird to paint a fowl? We will never understand an artist's obsessions, will we? We must trust that they are following some mysterious path known only to themselves. The last of Isabella's trunks are loaded into the Bucentaur. Ludovico kisses both of her cheeks and then her forehead. He holds her close. When we meet again, Francesco will have run the French out of Italy. Take care of my sister, Isabella says. She needs a husband as much as a prince. She turns away from him, giving her hand to the river captain, who will help her on board. Before she steps onto the boat, she looks up river to see that the magistro is watching her. He makes a small obeisance, never unlocking his mournful brown eyes from hers. He is beginning to look like the sketches of old men that she had seen in his workshop. She wonders if he has always been haunted by the inevitable spectre of his aged self, aware that lurking in the shadows of his beauty was the ever-present ghost of his old age. Was that why the lovely adolescent boys he drew were always by his side with ancient men with craggy faces? She nods her head to acknowledge him. She would like to bow to him in return, but it would be unseemly, so she puts her hand over her heart like a courtier would do for a king. It is a small gesture, but Isabella hopes that he receives it with the respect and the sympathy that she intends. Chapter 7. Il Bagotto, the Magician. From the notebook of Leonardo. On the arrangement of the figures of the apostles in relation to Christ. One drinks, leaving the cup in its place, and turns his head toward the speaker. Another twists his fingers together and turns with stern brows to his companion. The next opens his hands, showing their palms, and, raising his shoulders toward his ears, he gapes in amazement. Another speaks into his neighbor's ear, and the listener turns toward him and gives him his ear, as he holds a knife in one hand and in the other a loaf of bread, cut in half by this knife. The next, holding a knife in one hand, turns over his glass with the other hand. Another rests his hands upon the table and stares, while yet another breathes heavily with an open mouth. Another leans forward to look at our Lord, and shades his eyes with his hand. Another draws himself back behind the one who is leaning forward, and watches the Christ between the wall and the one who is leaning. Perhaps Alessandro Carissimo of Parma for the hand of Christ? In the years 1495 and 1496, in the city of Milan. Beatrice watches Ludovico lower his head to receive the tall ducal cap, allowing the emperor's ambassadors to drape the official mantle around his broad shoulders. She almost giggles when the same smile with which he receives a delicious platter of food, or a good goblet of wine, or the promise of sex breaks across his face, as he accepts the golden scepter and sword of the kingdom. Sword? Did I just say sword? If only Isabella could be here to see the height to which her sister has risen. That is all Beatrice can think as she sits on the great tribunal erected for this occasion in the front of the Duomo, in the shadow of the Magistro's equestrian monument, watching as her husband is proclaimed Duke of Milan and Count of Pavia by order of Emperor Maximilian of Germany and the Holy Roman Empire. But Isabella is pregnant again, and Francesco alone represents the Gonzagas of Mantua at the ceremony. Beatrice has participated in every detail leading to this moment, from acting as her husband's ambassador and adviser to supervising the making of the enormous scarlet cloth draping the podium on which they presently stand. She visited the embroiderers every day to make sure that the mulberry leaves and berries, symbols of Il Moro, were woven into the fabric with the finest gold thread and in the most intricate detail. When it is time for her to do her part, she cannot focus on the rush of words that whirl past her as every noble and patriarch who preside over the houses and great families of Lombardy pledge their allegiance and fealty to Ludovico, and then to his duchess. She recognizes every face, but she is nervous, gripped by fear and thrills alike. She has not eaten in days. Her mind is such a muddle that it would be difficult for her to call any of these individuals by name. Thank God, her only duty at this moment is to stand and solemnly receive the honors being bestowed upon her as Duchess of Milan. Ludovico had surprised her days earlier by announcing that he was appointing her regent of the Duchy of Milan and guardian of their 2 sons. If anything were to happen to him, she would preside over the kingdom until their oldest boy came of age. It is not an unusual honor for a husband to bestow upon his wife, but Beatrice had just passed her 20th birthday. In the event of Ludovico's demise, no elderly chancellor or body of governors would have sovereignty over her. She would inherit Ludovico's power in its entirety, and would safeguard it until little Max could resume the title and the responsibilities. After the ceremony, as the entire party rides in procession to St. Ambrogio Cathedral to give thanks, Beatrice is composing a mental letter to Isabella. This is the grandest and most noble solemnity that has ever been beheld by our young eyes. She does not want to sound as if she is boasting. She has missed Isabella terribly since her departure in March. Little Max, who had taken such a liking to his aunt, would run up and down the halls of the Castello calling her name, and Ludovico would look wistfully at his swans whenever they crossed the moat into the palace and proclaim Isabella a woman whose every gesture proclaims her noble character. Beatrice is no longer jealous of her sister. Isabella no longer flirts with Ludovico, at least not in Beatrice's presence. Her sister even seemed to go out of her way to avoid Ludovico when she was last in Milan, reluctant, or at least it seemed to Beatrice, to spend any time alone with him at all. Years of marriage, duty, and motherhood may have worked its sedulous, steadying effect on Isabella, as it has on Beatrice. The 2 are no longer girls competing for attention, but women, brought together by blood and by experience. Events have been happening with such rapidity in Beatrice's life that she would love to have her sister's cool-headed counsel these last few months. Now that their mother is dead, Isabella is the mentor and female protector in Beatrice's world. With no mother to turn to, when confronting a challenge or a situation that threatened to overwhelm her, Beatrice has found herself asking, what would Isabella do in this situation? Then she would act in accordance to how she believed her sister would act. Even when Isabella was nowhere in sight, thinking of her gave Beatrice an invisible model of strength and courage to emulate. Sometimes she looks into a crowd and imagines that she sees Isabella coming toward her, only to discover that she has fabricated her sister's presence. Later that evening, at the candle-bright festa for 2,000 guests to commemorate the occasion, Beatrice finds herself drawn only to Francesco. Ludovico had asked her in advance to chat with Francesco to try and read his pulse on the matter of fighting the French, but Beatrice finds that she wishes only for some first-hand news about her sister. Speak to me not of our usual obsession of horses, Marquis, she says to Francesco, ignoring the long line of dignitaries and well-wishers who want a word with her. I only want to hear of my sister's health and her goings-on. You must tell me everything in great detail, because I find that letters are inadequate and leave me wanting for more information. Well, she is about this big, he says, putting his hands out a few inches from his stomach, and she is evermore the Arab horse-trader when it comes to procuring beautiful things to decorate her studiolo. She bargains with tremendous conviction. Many a merchant along the trade routes would love to have her talents, I swear to you. She is so cagey and clever that sometimes I think she must be a Venetian. Beatrice can see his pride lighting up his wide, watery brown eyes. Of course, he should appreciate his wife. Beatrice has heard that Isabella, proud, beautiful Isabella, has pawned her most precious jewels to help Francesco pay for armor and supplies for the Italian League army. She asked Andrea Mantinega for a painting of such and such dimensions to cover a certain space on a wall in the studiolo, and requested that he make it of some classical theme. What do you think the old man came up with? He is making a painting of the 9 muses on Mount Parnassus, and who do you think is the golden-haired muse in the dead center of the painting? It's our own Isabella. in her pregnant state, dancing among the others. She is more beautiful than Venus, who presides over the painting. She is more beautiful than Venus, Beatrice says. Finally, someone has painted her for what she is, a muse. Oh yes, she inspires everyone, he says. If I were a jealous man, I would have already killed dozens of poets and painters and courtiers. Beatrice does not even attempt to stifle her laugh. But Marquis, you are a jealous man. So I am. Perhaps we should take a moment to reflect upon my self-restraint. After all the guests have departed and the Duke and his Duchess are alone, Ludovico wants to know what Beatrice and Francesco had been discussing with such liveliness. She tells him about Isabella being painted as a muse. Good! Then she will stop pestering us over Magister Leonardo, at least for a while, he answers. Mantanega is a genius, too. I hope he can slake her thirst. All right. The eyes are getting tired. Whew. That will bring our reading to a close this evening, everybody. Sorry for the beginning crazy technical difficulties. I have no idea if it was me, if it was TikTok, I don't know. But yes, so for anyone who's just popped onto the live, we have been reading Leonardo Swans by Karen Essex. If you have missed the other readings, you can find them on my YouTube page. So just go to my bio and click on the little camera icon, and it'll show you the link to my YouTube page. It should say Mimi. If it doesn't, let me know, because sometimes it keeps resetting to an old email, to an old YouTube link that I was paired with for a time. But until then, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Stay hydrated, stay safe, enjoy the beautiful weather, and I will see you guys on Tuesday from 8 to 9:30-ish. So until then, I will see you guys later. Have a great night.